Well, hello and welcome to the AI Pathfinder for Private Equity podcast. Bit of a mouthful, but we're sticking with that name for now. I'm in the process of launching a new expert network focused on AI in private equity. With any new idea or business, one of the most important things and interesting things for me is to speak to lots of people that this service may affect. And I've been doing a lot of that lately, and every conversation I'm learning so much. But I'm not sharing that. It's all for me, which is great. But I think that a lot of the conversations I'm having, other people could be hearing and learning from. Hence the launch of the podcast. And over the coming months, I'm going to be talking to those that are very much in the private equity space and those that are on the value chain, AI value chain. And one of those is here today to talk to me, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with a chief AI officer, no less. And I definitely, if we look at his profile, he definitely deserves that job title. So welcome, Shaun, CAIO at DevOn. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Glad to be on the AIFPPPPE podcast. There's another P in there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. You've helped with the acronym. Maybe that'll just spin off the tongue after a few of these episodes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Let's kick off. Let's kick off, and just want to learn a little bit about you and your company. Obviously, as much as we can in the context to our listeners, investors, and their portfolio company. Just give us a bit of background for us, please, Shaun.
Yeah. So I work for DevOn, which is part of a larger group of companies, actually. So the group goes back about 18, 20 years, and it was founded originally as a transformation consultancy around agile decision-making, ways of working, helping humans work together with other humans in a different way. And that launched in the Netherlands, and it had lots of Dutch organizations as customers. Some of them large enterprises, some public sector organizations, and then started to get into a little bit of helping private equity companies with their recently invested companies change the ways of working of the software companies, especially that they had purchased, and so they had inherited some ways of working that maybe weren't optimal or modern or fast or agile. And then 8 or 10 years ago, the software development that we started to do off the back of that was split off, and so the parent group is called VADA, and the principal investor is Vikram Kapoor, and so he has sort of a stable of companies, one of which is DevOn, which grew out of our sister company ProAwareness, and so ProAwareness continues to help organizations change their entire organizational setup and ways of working, and then we at DevOn focus on the software development lifecycle aspects of that, and we now have about 400 consultants and developers who can also augment the work of those teams and accelerate that journey to what we call high performance. So we're privately owned, and we're sort of in it for the long run across that value chain of those companies, and we are expanding into the UK as well. So that's why me, as someone based in London, is the Chief AI and Data Officer. When the company looked to, how do we expand into the UK? Starting that thinking a couple of years ago, it's also when the company started thinking about AI. And it's a natural and hot topic. It's just easier to ride the latest wave when you're taking what you do in one market to another market. With something as powerful as AI, a general purpose technology, it really allows me to burn away all of the other stuff that has accumulated over 10, 20, 30 years about data and technology and decision making, and actually get to the essence of what I care about, which is how do we help humans and the organizations they inhabit make better decisions. And this is that moment for me. So that's why I'm in the game and all in on AI, not because I don't care about data anymore, but data is the most important ingredient in AI. But it allows me to get to a business problem faster, half the time, maybe more than half the time. That business problem, once you use AI to get people to talk about it, you realize and they realize no AI is needed to solve this problem. And that's a great value outcome from AI, realizing we don't need it. All we needed to do was talk to each other, write down the steps and automate that process.
Thank you, Shaun. That because it's AI is now in everyone's hands, is that that could become, for someone that's got your background and discipline and focus, is that, does that become then a bit of a burden because everyone's talking about it and not many people understand it, and not just understand it but how it can really solve problems? Is that causing a delay to actually getting the value out of it for you?
I mean, inevitably, yes. Like at the start of any application of a new general purpose technology, that's just where we are. Probably 1 year ago, I would have said it really is a burden, and like everyone is just saying, but I don't know the use cases for AI, right? Tell me what your job is. What do you do all day? What data do you work with? What decisions are you trying to make? So it is a burden, but I think it's the useful kind of burden, right? That forces us to do a lot of the work that other waves of technological driven transformation did not. So the classic cloud anti-pattern was, here's my big monolith application. Someone told me it'll be cheaper in the cloud. I put it in the cloud and it's slower and more expensive. Or in big data land, someone told me I installed this big data cluster and now I'll have insights delivered to me somehow, but actually I've got the same dashboards and the same Excels being emailed to me because it was too easy to just do the tech of those other things. And so the benefit of it being in everyone's hands at some level, there's much more benefit for using the burden for something good, I find. And the way that has become very concrete to me, I've just come back from a bunch of traveling, training lots of different audiences in how to use AI in lots of different job roles, both within the software development lifecycle and sort of adjacent. The kind of the magical realization I had is that the best way you can teach people how to think about AI for their job is to actually have them talk with a large language model about that, right? So instead of thinking too much about whiteboards and installing Python and that stuff, you can get a hell of a long way to simulating someone's problem, simulating the data about that problem, and simulating an AI solution to that problem, just talking away to AI. So that's how I sort of use the fact it's a burden against the people who want the easy answer. At the start of every training, when I ask what people want from AI, again, half the things, you could have had that from technology before AI. Why do you think AI will solve that one? And then a small fraction are like, I want dancing robots. But most people that I'm finding now have quite reasonable expectations. And then by making them explain their ideas for AI to an AI product, they learn the limitations of AI in general without overly focusing on their use case. And then they might also solve their use case realizing, I don't need a whole system. I just need the right three prompts. Yeah. And now this thing that used to take me an hour can take me 3 minutes if I just find the right 3 prompts. So there's a huge creative moment that can happen in everyone's job. Disappointing thing about the burden is when, and I understand why, it's justified, people switch off their creativity and expect AI to give them the answers without any good questions. But as soon as people make that switch, they can get value immediately. Yeah.
Well, look, let's move into a bit more in the context of private equity. Why should they be excited by recent improvements with AI? Not just excited, maybe why should they be slightly worried? And do you think there's an urgency? Should there be an urgency for them to act, or should it be more of a let's wait and see type of approach?
Depends what their investment targets and thesis are. So I think we already know some things about which industries are not going to fundamentally change or not change as much or change slower. But some of those things are a little bit unexpected. And it does go back to what you said about, until you get to that kind of task level, job to be done level in your analysis of how a workforce can change or a company can change, you don't really know anything. Investors of all stripes probably like to think about how, whole humans can be replaced or removed or upskilled or moved somewhere else or recycled into another one of their portfolio companies. And that will happen. So I'm not one of those boosters who says, oh, it's just going to augment every job and everyone would be better off. Like, no, some jobs that that exist now and occupy a whole person won't exist in 1 or 5 years, but most of those jobs are jobs that probably could have already been automated by prior waves. So I think if you're investing in a company, and because of where private equity comes into the life cycle of companies, like legacy is there by definition, not just in ways of working, but in the software products and at some of the events that you and I have been to and met people at. Private equity people have a hard time, understandably, understanding how technical teams, which they often call R&D teams, which is very interesting, do their work and what value they get out from changes in software given what they put in. And AI does sort of threaten perhaps to add a whole annoying smokescreen on top of that and make it even tougher to understand, okay, I have just, my bid was the winning bid to take over this payroll company, or, I tend to give B2B software examples because that dominates our customer base, and many of those customers go through private equity life cycles. Yeah, there is a risk that the smokescreen from AI further covers like the detail of like, how does this thing that I just bought actually work once you get inside the machine, given that from the outside, before you've invested. So I think understanding the technology at a very basic level is required. Otherwise, not only will companies that you ordinarily would have bought, right, you might get confused about how they're generating value with AI. But also, if you are then looking to invest in companies where AI is one of their things, you'll sort of be doubly on the back foot. And it doesn't mean that you need to become a programmer and an expert in machine learning and build your own AI models. The good thing about how general purpose the technology is, you just need to be good using it in your own job, because the same questions you'll get used to asking are the same questions you would ask anyone who says, I want to sell my company to you and we use AI to do X, Y, Z. If you've been using AI to do any task within your job, the same questions that helped you improve that task are the same questions you would ask to people trying to sell you an AI flavor of something. So yeah, I think the most urgent would be if you're investing in very techie companies where AI is or will be part of their value proposition, like that is urgent, because you might buy the wrong thing. You might buy something with no defendable moat. More of a problem in startup land, but that problem is going to come to other kinds of companies as well.
Yeah, there's the other sort of dynamic is, well, that you've got numerous portfolio companies in different sectors, slightly different models. Obviously, there's something that brings them together, why they're in one fund, I suppose. You've also got the fact that they are at different times in their cycle. So they've just been acquired, or they're in the middle part of the cycle, or they're looking now to exit. And so that will change the way that a PE firm will want to, how active they'll be, I suppose. Does that sort of present an opportunity, do you think, particularly for, I suppose, the portfolio company? Perhaps an average private company wouldn't have. Yeah, can you see it an upside?
Absolutely. I think, and as you say, a portfolio company that tends to invest in companies in a similar area of a market, those companies may be at different stages. But if they're all payroll or business process kind of companies, or they're all travel companies, or whatever it might be, the thing that ties them all together beyond where they are in the market is the data that they do collect, right? So I think that is a totally unexplored frontier. And AI doesn't do anything totally special there. It doesn't help us avoid the hard work about thinking what data we want to join together and how we want to productize it. What it does do is lower the cost of a lot of that work in a way that we didn't have before. So me having gone through, productizing and attempting to productize data in the big data era, just doing the work was very slow and expensive. But I think if you're invested in portfolio companies in hospitality or healthcare or any industry across your portfolio, your companies are generating data assets that, for their limited view of the particular part of that value chain that they serve, maybe they have no other use for that data. But if you could unlock, the commercial value in even having your portfolio companies sell their data to each other, then you might find totally new product propositions, spin-offs, new value. You might launch that thing towards the end of the cycle that helps you have that exit that you want. And if you do that just in a commercially sensible way, then you're not becoming a sort of blocker by becoming a central data store. You're setting up commercial relationships between companies that could increase the value of all the companies. And I think that what I would really love to see AI do is to help us detect, patterns and useful ways of using data that's generated across those portfolio companies. Because the data that's generated in a given portfolio, it does represent some of the domain knowledge, right, that is in the companies and maybe in the investors' heads about what works. But it's records about what products work, it's records about what customers do, it's preferences. Like, there's some really great ideas in that data that only someone from the outside would see. But if you're a portfolio company, you have the benefit of having insider outsiders who are not fully outsiders, who could sidle up to their buddies in the portfolio and say, oh, gee, we have the same owner and we both work in healthcare, and it turns out the data I've always wanted to launch this product is the data that you have. Can we reach an agreement? So that's a lot of human work. That's a lot of detailed data investigation. I'm excited to see how AI just lowers the cost of that hard work and allows more companies to do that and think about that in a sensible way.
How have you seen that business? It could be a hire, couldn't it? It could be a hire, a chief data officer, or someone that's going to look over it. It could be a working group. I'm just trying to think of practically what could private equity firm, how could they start thinking about trying to surface some of that data and not just think isolated portfolio companies, but actually start to think. I mean, it feels like a bit of a leap, I have to say, in the conversations I've had at the moment, but that's a really interesting thought where they could start seeing how there could be connections between the portfolio companies, and there could be a lot of value in the fact that within the group than just looking in isolated cases.
Yeah, the way I would structure an approach to that is, I'm reminded of a recent dinner I went to with a lot of investors and companies looking for investment, and a guy with some kind of platform in the healthcare and aged care industry stood up and said, I'm sitting on a ton of data and I really want to do something with it. Will AI let me do something with it? So you need the commercial person who wants to make money in that conversation. I think many such exercises, so the kind of exercise that you're hinting at, I've seen it done within companies, including by data teams, and I've been part of those data teams. But when it's a technological exercise, when it's a cataloging exercise, A, it's boring, B, no one cooperates. They think you're the police, right? Yeah. And C, it's not being driven by people with a commercial incentive to then invest it. Where I've seen it done particularly well is the parent company of the UK subsidiary I used to work for was privately owned, and it was actually a conglomeration, right? Within those companies and with their external companies, including their competition, they bought and sold, I can't say the number, but the amount of data that they bought and sold every year was massive. But they bought and sold approximately the same amount in money terms, but that made possible integrations and new products that weren't possible without it. So if I were to put people in the room, let's say there's 3 portfolio companies, 2 might be challenging, we might need 3 to find something. We need 1 person from each portfolio company who talks to the customers of that company daily about their domain challenges. So in the sales process, in the support process, what are those people actually struggling with? What are their top 3 challenges, regardless of what you sell them, right? Which is not a natural thing to always ask. So once you have those people, and then you need, I call this person, the person who knows where the bodies are buried, right? Someone with enough knowledge about the data estate of each of those companies, and you need some kind of facilitator, right? So that could be an external person, someone like me, or you could hire an appropriate internal person to your portfolio to do that. But you don't want to hire, in my opinion, a 10 or 100 person data team to just start building prototypes. because 99% of those will just fail. Not even technologically, just if the businesses that are supposed to sell that thing. Because what you're trying to do is have your portfolio companies invest less in their core business to invest in something that you want that's bigger than all of them. And unless the commercial people are there from the very beginning and they connect all of that work and the cost of that work to a new thing that will solve a new challenge that they don't currently solve for their customer, but would increase the value of what they do to their customer. So yeah, you need the customer in the room through the salesperson, but it needs to be tempered by the people who know what's feasible with the data that you have, because otherwise they'll just, and I've been part of that process too, salespeople promise whatever data product. Well, we don't actually collect that data, so that's going to be real fun to work that. So you don't want that to happen each. But people would probably be surprised how far you can get with a very domain-driven, customer-centric conversation for unlocking this data ideas.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Let's get into perhaps a more practical example of an application that could help our listeners just try and connect to, and that's what they're asking for. They want to try and connect to case studies, use cases that are sort of proven and have gone through a cycle and have had an impact. Is there one that comes to mind that would be good to sort of talk through, ideally from a non-technical, not too technical perspective?
So the one that comes up in every training I do, every customer conversation, every industry, every person's job, everyone who works with a computer at some point in their day-to-day work has to take a body of information, right, and slot it into some boxes, right? So whether this is, here's a whole bunch of text data and I now need to fill out this form, or whether it's, here's a bunch of incoming investment briefs or chatter on the internet about companies that may or may not be for sale. That's the input data. And then the other input in this pattern in private equity would be, well, what are we actually looking to do? What do we want to invest in? What are our investment criteria? The exact same pattern comes up whether it's software engineers trying to update code from this standard to that standard, infrastructure engineers having to update Terraform templates from this to that. Everyone's got some part of their job where they've got a large amount of semi-structured sort of data, and they need to kind of confront that with a structured standard or target that they want. And so, depending on which particular kind of PE firm, they might be the kind that looks at lots of public or less public information and has lots of things in the pipeline, and they need to quickly whittle them down. And you've already got a statement of an investment criteria. It's probably even on your website, but you have a version of that internally. And if an individual just learns how to prompt a large language model effectively, they can very quickly learn how to structured output in the format, the tone, the extensiveness that they want based on very unstructured input. And this is not at all revolutionary. Humans can do this. And the efficiency gain may not even be wild, right? Because I bet a sufficiently expert investor can scan 100 slides of some document, and they've got some investment criteria in their head. And just by scanning it, the human brain with domain expertise model inside it is incredibly fast at this. But the reason I would push people towards something like that is it's a very good way to understand where AI's limitations and benefits are, right? So it's not going to double, triple the speed at which you can act on an incoming investment brief, but it's a very, very good way to very rapidly increase your understanding of what AI can do. So I'm over the past few years, I've shied away a bit more for recommending upfront as a practical thing, trying to find that one magic super efficiency gaining thing, but to actually ask people that the first things they do with AI are things they can do themselves, and they, maybe they get a 10-20% speed up. Maybe once they get really good at this, they start spotting opportunities in companies they might have dismissed if they were scanning them, but they learn what AI can actually do and what ingredients you need to make it successful. And then the good thing is, if they then start to believe that AI can help them, then they can think about scaling that up, right? And think about, okay, well, actually, can we scan the internet for this? If we transcribe all of our conversations, if we use our CRM and our history, our unique data on the whole, can we, I don't know, go back in time and replay some of the investments we did or didn't make and see what we could have missed? And then you get to the real value, the sort of disruptive value of AI. But you're only going to trust it to do things like that and confront it with that kind of sensitivity of data if you believe that it can spot a cat in a picture of dogs. If you don't do the equivalent thing in your domain, you are expecting too much of it in one go.
How, with a lot of experiments, proof of concepts, how have you got some practical advice of how you should be measuring success? You've talked about, efficiency, potentially there's commercial upside, or there's improvement in, or it's picked up potentially mistakes, or it's elevated your performance. How in reality do you measure that?
Yeah. It's easy and it's not easy. Going back to what I said about, this technology often just forces us to do hard work that we may have avoided. So there'll be all kinds of cases where trying to use AI to do something reveals some inefficiency and actually creates more inefficiency in the short run. Then, so efficiency is something that I think is best measured by the individual in their own individual workflow, right? So if you want efficiency gains from AI, you should enable all your people to work with it and to find their own ways of becoming more efficient, right? Because people will do the same tasks slightly differently. They all have slightly different roles. I don't think PE firms have, large customer help desks sitting there doing nothing. They don't have a lot of the obvious places that people would go with AI, and which, truth be told, other waves of technology have already sort of cleaned out a huge amount of that inefficiency. So I think it's too early to think about massive efficiency gains from any flavor of AI in the way that we work, unless every individual in the team that you then want to think how the team becomes more efficient, if every individual has found one efficiency improvement for them in one task, them simply sharing those will mean that the other people in the team who do similar things can immediately adopt that same thing with almost no adoption barrier. And then they'll come to this thing of which is, partly the whole point. Oh, yeah, we made, these 1990s processes 50% more efficient, and then we realized, why do we run it like that at all? So the big efficiency jump will only come from actually reinventing a process. But you need to know the process that you run right now. You need to have tried and failed and maybe succeeded to make some small improvements to that. And that will force you to do that hard work of understanding that process, what data do we have, what kind of AI do we need to help that, and then even more importantly, even if we had the perfect AI thing at that step of the process, could we integrate that into the rest of our business, right? And that's pretty quickly going to become a barrier. Some people are going to get really amazing at prompting and becoming super individually efficient, and that value won't be realized because they'll be pushing against a brick wall. So efficiency is a tough one. And it starts with the individual. I think that another way to measure it is how can you use AI to stop you making dumb mistakes. Not everyone likes to admit making mistakes, whether they're dumb mistakes or justifiable mistakes. But again, you're lowering the bar for what you want AI to do, right? If you find a way to make it double check everything you do, and if you instruct it in a way to be particularly diligent about checking this or that, then it can be a very valuable, backstop and last line of defense. Again, by doing that, you would then learn what its capabilities are to make it be more proactive, right? And to recommend things that you do rather than recommend things not to do. So this is where we are right now. A lot of the value drivers people look for. If we want to be successful in the long run, we're going to have to accept a limited version of that, often a negative, like a flipped version of that, to actually learn how to use this technology before we go and try and do a big thing. But if we do that work, we will find new things that we absolutely could not have done, right? That become possible because of...
Yeah, so, it's almost one job at a time.
Absolutely.
But, I do wonder, though, that will obviously then help you better understand. But rather than just moving on, well, I've done that one, I'm going to move on to the next one, is that, how important is it that we start to perhaps reimagine the way that we work? And I don't want to be too general here, but, private equity as, quite a, it's quite defined in terms of the process, I suppose.
Yeah.
Is this an industry ripe for? I mean, this could be a half-hour podcast on its own, but should they be thinking right now that we probably should have one eye on 5 years and how we perhaps look to change the model?
Yeah, I think so. The challenge is that's a hard prediction problem. The only way to hit the 5-year target is to start now in some direction, and the simplest way to start is, as you said, one job at a time. I can draw an analogy from what software went through. So when software sent people to the moon and stuff like that, software developers and engineers were generalists, right? They understood what was needed from their software, they wrote the software, they tested the software, they shipped the software, they maintained the software. Then we wanted a lot more software, and when we want a lot more of something, we like to specialize it and say, okay, no, you talk to the customer and then tell these people what code to write, and then you tell these people what tests to run. One of the negative effects of this is that the number of people creating stuff at the top of the software funnel exploded, because it's very easy to think of things you want to do with software. But the ratio of testers to developers plummeted from 1 to 1, because they were the same person, to, in most companies that we work with, they're really, really far behind on testing, even if they're doing interesting things in development. They're sort of 5 to 10 years behind often best practice. We're recording this on the day of the CrowdStrike outage, right? So potentially one developer put one line of code in a thing that has brought down half the world. That's a little bit of a problem. Now, one of the ways that software has pushed back to increase quality and to reinvent processes is to do what we call T-shaped skills, right? So if you're a developer, what do you need to learn about testing to be a better developer, and to make sure your testing colleagues can become better developers, and most importantly do the hardest testing work? So I think if any industry, and I think P would also qualify, if there are like very rigidly defined boxes of humans that do things in a deal flow, the natural way to think about reinventing that is, what are the T skills that we do? So if someone only does this part of it, what is the value add that they can do before and after their part in the chain? And then how do you use AI to lower the barrier to them doing those things? And that's when you start to get flexibility in your process, once you have turned it from an industrial factory, like literal Adam Smith, this person does this to the metal, this person sharpens it, humans love to break things down into these incredibly detailed boxes because we think things can scale, and they can if you're making pins in a factory in Manchester, but that's not what private equity does, and that's also not what software development is. We've had some conversations with some legal firms going through similar things. Any human-intensive, human knowledge-intensive, overly boxified process will be ripe for change. The way I would recommend is, for each person in each box, how do you blur the boundary? Now, for many organizations, that's terrifying because they like boundaries. But if you want to change how you run your organization, that's what's required.
Yeah, well, exciting times for those forward-thinking firms.
Absolutely.
Out there.
Yeah. And it'll be smaller and medium-sized ones that do that first, because they realize, we've always wanted to compete with that big name. True of any industry. We've always had this constraint. But if we changed our process, we'd get ahead of them on this part of the process, which would then mean it wouldn't matter so much that we were smaller here. And that's what competition does. It rewards creativity, and AI can help us be more creative if we want to be.
Yeah. Shaun, look, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks for having me. Great conversation. Thank you.